Hello, everyone. Welcome to this series of ethics and ethical clearance related to research, thesis, dissertations, all the points we are discussing in these uh, videos. And if any point of time you have some ideas, you also have some points or questions to ask or points to make, feel free to mention that in the chat box. So in this fourth video of this entire series, and that is this is the last video, we will be specifically covering the journal's expectations and the guidelines for scholarly publishing. So, of course, all the points which we have discussed so far in part 1, 2, 3 of ethics and ethical clearance, those are important. So, we will not be covering that here, but we will mostly be covering the applied part of it. Okay. So, whenever we are submitting our research paper to any journal, we have to submit a lot many documents, that is the blind manuscript, the figures, the tables, the cover letter. But there is one document, that is declaration or conflict of interest, is a mandatory document, and we have to prepare that prior to the submission as per the author guidelines which the journal has or have. Okay, so what we actually declare in that, we declare the financial conflicts or funding if there will be any. We also discuss about professional relationships, that with the journal or any of the editorial team we do not have any personal relationships and we do not know anyone. We have to declare that. Sometimes we also have to declare the IPR issues. We have to declare author related conflicts, that all the authors are aligned with the work and no author in the entire team has any conflict of interest. Okay, so these are a few things which we have to include in the document declaration or conflict of interest that we have to submit to the journal with our research article or with our manuscript. Okay, now let's discuss what are the points which we have to be very cautious of when we are submitting to the journal. So, as I have discussed, and we are continuously discussing this part, that first we have to be very clear about the originality and plagiarism. Of course, the paper is written by you, so we need not to be worried about the originality, but the plagiarism, specifically in the current times wherein the discussions are going on, that even sometimes the because of the AI tools and other things, the Turnitin, the softwares like Turnitin takes certain words, certain sections as plagiarized. Even if sometimes, let's say, some frequent words are used, let's say gross domestic product, that is GDP. So sometimes these words across the manuscripts are also highlighted by the Turnitin. Okay, so whenever we are calculating the plagiarism part, please note that the journals have a certain guidelines that beyond 10% they will not accept the manuscript. Usually it's 10% for for the journal's guideline. So let's make sure and check the plagiarism part before we submit to our journal, and ensure that the manuscript is an original work and not copied from any source, or not made from any AI source. And we have to use the plagiarism detection tools like Turnitin or softwares like Turnitin before the submission. And we have to properly cite all the sources and give credit for the ideas, data, text which we have uh, taken from their sources. Okay, so the very first point is this: if, for example, the work will not be original, or the plagiarism part, that is the similarity index, goes beyond 10%, your paper might get desk rejected. So let's make this and let's note this point. Then comes the authorship ethics, that only includes the individuals who have actually made a substantial contributions to the research. Okay, as I have indicated, when we submit, so the corresponding author gets on the journal interface, like for Taylor and Francis, for Elsevier, for Emerald, there will be an interface wherein you will clearly cite that, okay, X author has done the drafting, um, or the introduction, writing the introduction or the review of literature. The Y author has done the analysis and the discussion part, or the Z author has written the discussion and the conclusion. So, just an example that the clear indication is given to the corresponding author, and he needs to clearly mention and give the contributions credit to to the person. So it should be clearly indicated, and all the authors must approve the final manuscript before the submission. So we have to make sure and communicate in written, so that all the authors should be aligned and there should not be any conflict of interest arise after or at the later stage of publication. Okay, the next point comes as data integrity. That is, we have to report the data very accurately and honestly. We should not be fabricating it or falsify it or manipulate the results. Because if any at any stage of review or at any stage it will be, it will come to the notice, then it will, because there are instances when at the later stage, when the authors are not able to give clear cut indications about their manuscript, even if the manuscripts have published, they have been retracted. Okay, so let's be very cautious about this. Maintain the data records, whether it's primary or secondary, for the verification, and always keep and give a declaration that we have a data copy and we have the sources copy if it's a secondary data, and it will be given if the journal or at any stage, if the journal or the editors request it, keeping the research ethics in mind, that if it is an anonymously collected from the expert, we may address it as expert 1 and expert 2, but we can surely share the transcripts of the interaction which we have with the experts, but with whatever conditions we have agreed on with the participants. Then comes the ethical approval part for the studies, that if, for instance, human participants are involved, then we have to take the permission and attach and share there that yes, in the research, because on every platform across the publishers, there will be a checkbox which you have to tick on, that whether the human participants are involved in the research or not. If not, you can clearly tick that they are not involved. If they are involved, we have to include a statement in the paper about the informed consent, compliance, and the ethical guidelines which are being followed. So we have to clarify that to the journal. Then comes the conflict of interest, like disclosure of any financial, personal, or professional relationships. So, in the beginning, I was just discussing that there is a document, that is a declaration or conflict of interest, which we have to submit to the journal, and we have to be very mindful that we need to provide the transparency to the editors and journal, that we have kept every single conflict of interest in mind, and in this research there is no such conflict existing. Then comes avoiding duplicate submission. So it is very important, and researchers sometimes do this. Let's note it that never ever submit a single paper to two or more than two journals at a time. Okay, avoid submitting duplicate submission, and do not submit the same manuscript to multiple journals simultaneously. So let's say, for example, if a journal rejects to submit your to get or process your paper, or does reject your paper, then only from the same date you can submit it to the next journal, but not if you have submitted to X journal, wait for the response from X journal, only then you can submit it to Y journal. Otherwise it will be a duplicate submission, and sometimes the journal may blacklist you, because remember, ORCID IDs, and we have discussed about the mandatory IDs which a researcher makes, like ORCID ID and Scopus ID, Web of Science ID. So editors own the right to give you the review and the feedback. So it might hamper your academic credibility. Okay, so never ever submit to more than two more, like never ever submit the same manuscript to the multiple journals at the same time or simultaneously. If publishing related work, clarify how new submission is distinct from the previous submissions. Otherwise, sometimes it's a series of the submissions, right? So we have to be very cautious while submission and avoid it. Never ever submit the same manuscript to different journals at a time. Then comes the proper acknowledgement. So, the source funding, institutional support. If you have received any institutional support, please let's disclose that and recognize the contributions that do not meet the authorship criteria in the acknowledgements sections. That To every single author, what are the acknowledgements. So let's give that. Sometimes you might have seen in the end of the published researches, the credit taxonomy is given, right? So nowadays credit taxonomy is also an option which can be given across the authors. So specifically it gives a clear indication that which author has done what work. Okay, so let's do that. Then responsible reporting, that discuss the limitations of your study honestly in the work, whether it's like, sometimes it's like it's contradictory, right? Sometimes it's controversial, but honestly admit it, then only we'll be able to, you know uh, maintain the parity, and the future researchers can actually build on that. So let's ensure figures, table, images are accurately uh, mentioned. Mention the source if it's created by you, clearly indicate its authors, you know created. If not, cite the source. Then comes the compliance with the journal policies. So please read the aim and scope of the journal very, very clearly, and follow the journal submission guidelines, formatting requirement, because these are major things because of which the paper gets rejected or desk rejected. Okay, and we never want a paper to get desk rejected. At least it should go under the review, right? Then formatting requirements, ethical standards, all we have to check, and we have to check that all the documents which are required, the manuscript should be blind. There should not be mention of the author name at any point of time in the entire manuscript. The figure should be well edited and in the word form, so that if some additions are required at the later stage, at the production stage, the journal can do that. So follow the author submission guidelines. This is very important. If we miss on any of the author submission guideline, definitely there are high chances that a paper will be desk rejected. Then comes the post publication responsibilities. So be prepared to correct the errors, and do major. Sometimes, we all know that the review may come as a minor revision or a major revision. So let's be ready for that, and let's have that flexibility. Let's have that agility, that we need to do some changes to the journals as per the review